you how to use ACTech VRM or Vendor Relationship Management to manage your vendors. First thing we're going to do is we're going to register a new vendor. New vendor details. The first thing we'll capture is the name of the organization, and the system will then verify that we haven't already captured that specific vendor. So if I put ACTech Systems in, it's going to tell me there's already a number of different companies with that same name in the system. I can ignore the warning, or I can go back and recapture. Presuming that the company doesn't exist in the system, I'm then able to capture all of the fields on the screen, probably directly off your supplier registration form. There are certain validations on the screen. For example, the income tax reference number must be 10 digits, the same with the VAT number if you capture something there. Other fields, such as the tax clearance certificate expiry, these fields will be used later to drive the escalation rules to actually alert the users and also alert the vendor that their tax clearance and BEE certificates are due to expire. Regarding triple BEE, you can now capture here the type of scorecard that was used, and then capture the triple BEE status, recognition level percentage, and the score directly from the BEE certificate. If you choose level 3 contributor, for example, it's going to then default the recognition level to 110% and the BE score between 75 and 85%. Additional fields such as value-adding vendor, plus greater than 30% black women-owned and greater than 50% black-owned, can be used later to do reports and to do analysis to show the split of spend or commodities based on the various types of vendors and their BE levels. Regarding commodities, you can choose up to 10 commodities that this particular vendor supplies, and I can type in the first few letters of one of the words, and it's then going to give me a list of commodities with that specific word in the name. Addresses and phone numbers and email addresses can all be captured. And if you choose ACPAC address here, it will send and synchronize that address to ACPAC when the vendor is promoted. And the email address here is the email that will be used to actually drive the notifications out of VRM. Contact person here will be the primary contact person, which you can capture up as many different people as you want. But if you tick this remittance contact, that will be the contact that's sent to ACPAC as the remittance contact. And each individual person can then have their own email address as well. So having saved, this has now created an unregistered vendor within VRM. What I can then do is submit that vendor for approval, which will send them through. But firstly, what I'll do is I'm going to attach the various documentation that this vendor will have supplied to me. So I click on the Documents tab, and here I can then actually just right-click on Document Drop, choose Select a File, and then browse to my desktop and pick up, for example, the vendor registration form. I can then choose the type of document that this is, so let's say it's a registration certificate, and I can click Save. That will then upload that document into the library as a read-only copy, and the original can be deleted or moved, and it will not affect the read-only copy of this. What I can also do is minimize my screen and actually drag an individual file directly onto the shortcut for VRM and into the document drop. And I can say, for example, this is a tax clearance certificate. On the screen I can also go and add further addresses, edit the phone numbers and email addresses, and edit the contact people. From here then I can submit this vendor for approval. So there's a simple approval process here, and you can choose in the setup which users will be able to actually do the approval. But for example, this user here, I'm going to submit for approval. What I then do is log in as an authorized user. I'll get an alert to tell me that vendor ACTech Systems is awaiting approval. I can then click on that vendor. I can go through and verify all the information. I can look at the documents to make sure that what's been submitted matches with the data that's been captured. And at that point I can either decline it or I can choose to register it. If I choose registered, it will mark it as registered. It will then prompt me with the option to promote it to Sage ERP ACPAC. And that button is only going to be available once it's actually been approved. So If I click on that button, ask me to choose which ACPAC company I want to promote it to, and then I choose promote to vendor. At that point I can choose my vendor account number, my group code, my tax code and my terms code. And any optional fields that are in use I can choose on that screen as well. Clicking promote to vendor will then actually create that vendor directly in ACPAC for you. From within the vendor, I can also maintain all aspects of communication and interaction with that vendor. If I click on the Communications tab, on here I can record all tasks, appointments, emails and documents that are related to this specific vendor. For example, if I want to record a phone call to say that this vendor phoned with payment inquiry, I can click New Task, choose the action as a phone call in or a phone call out, and I can choose then, I could type in a note that the vendor called to complain about missing payment, and I can then add my notes that I inquired on ACPAC and there was a problem with the invoice. Vendor will resubmit invoice. What that allows me to then do is capture for myself a note of what happened, but also for others who need to see what's happened historically, and they can now see that system administrator spoke to Tershizitska and that was the information that was given. You can also record appointments here. Any vendor meetings can be captured, and you'll get a vendor meeting. You'll get a meeting planner here as well. And this will also integrate with ACPAC as well, with Outlook as well. I can send emails from here by just clicking on the email address, and I can say that this is a vendor approval. Type my details, and I can upload images and attachments and so on. And if I choose to send the mail from this point, it's going to send the mail, and it will then record in VRM the fact that that mail was sent, and that will be a read-only copy of that mail that no one else can amend. Documents, we've previously seen how you're able to attach a document from this screen as well. If I now go and choose a vendor that's already existed in ACPAC, we can see at the top, for example here, that's their vendor number, and that's their ACPAC database. I can see the ACPAC balance, and that will read live from ACPAC for you. If I scroll further over, I get additional options, for example, AP inquiry. And this will allow me to get a full history of the invoices and prepayments and receipts directly from accounts payable in ACPAC. I can choose to filter certain dates and certain document types. For example, this invoice here, with the specific vendor, with specific invoice information, I can then choose to drill down into that invoice. It's going to show me the individual GL accounts or distribution codes that this invoice went to, as well as any applied documents, such as payments that relate to this invoice. Also, if I go to PO inquiry, I can drill into purchase orders, and I can view purchase order requisitions, returns, receipts, purchase history, and serial numbers, and so on. If I click on all purchase orders, I can then view specific purchase orders here. I can view specific orders by arrival date as well, and then I can drill further into that actual purchase order and see the individual line items and the stock items that are on that with the stock locations, expected arrival dates, the quantities on back order, and all of that stuff directly and live out of ACPAC. And here, for example, is a stock receipt that was posted against that order. I can actually drill further into that stock item as well and see the quantities on hand and on back order and sales order for the individual stock locations as well. And an additional tab I can see here is vendor statistics, which is going to show me live from ACPAC static vendor information, my vendor aging, my document history in terms of highest balance, largest invoice, last payment, and then total numbers of invoices and payments for this particular period, which I can see here. To capture banking details, I can click on the Bank Details tab here, and here I can see the history of all banking details that have been captured here. It's impossible to edit a specific bank account on a vendor. There's no edit button here. The only way to change the banking details is to add a new banking record. Again, validations apply here, but you must have a certain format for the account number, account name, bank, account type, branch code. And I can choose then which user is going to be approving this specific bank account. but it's impossible for me to actually approve my own banking details. It'll tell me the banking details cannot be approved by the user by whom they were loaded. And the idea here is to eliminate fraud and potential error by having people being able to freely edit banking details. And the idea is also to keep the users out of ACPAC in this sense and to allow them to do all of their information from within VRM. I then get a notification here that this banking information needs approval, and this user can then go in and actually say to authorize, or they can force the previous user to fill in to make a modification of the branch code or whatever it happens to be. Once authorized, it's marked as authorized, and that will then create that bank account in the cash book in ACPAC. And further, what it will also do is actually email the vendor to tell them that their banking details have been amended in our system. If the vendor didn't actually request these updated banking details, they're then able to contact us and complain about that. But back on the bank details tab, I can get a history now of all the previous versions of the banking details, and I can see what's been changed, who authorized it, and what date and time it was authorized as well. In addition to this, any change to the company, address, phone, email, etc. will be audited in the audit trail here as well. We can get a full history here of all changes made to specific fields. We can define then the date and the time and the user that changed these specific records. So there's going to be an audit trail of that information as well. The tax clearance certificate and BE certificate expiry dates will actually trigger off a couple of alerts. You can have the user in VRM being alerted that either of those documents are expiring. The idea here is to choose that a month before expiry we get alerted, and we also alert the vendor so that when the tax clearance does expire, we've already got the latest tax clearance information. It doesn't slow down the procurement process. If I look in my Outlook here, we can see that this specific vendor has been emailed already to say that their BE certificate is due for expiry on that date and to contact us at that specific date and time. The same with the tax clearance information as well. One of the additional functionalities that VRM will offer is the ability to actually have a vendor register themselves on your website. This is through a function called SelfService. This is a sample website. This will be streamlined and tailored to the specific business website for your own organization. But if I click on the vendor registration tab, first it's going to prompt me for my vendor name and VAT registration number. And it will then verify that that number does not already exist in VRM. Presuming that it doesn't, it then prompts me with the vendor registration form. Obviously the user is then prompted for the tax clearance expiry dates and the BE certificate expiry dates as well. The BE information here can also be captured with the same logic that you got when capturing through VRM. So the same scripts and rules apply in this point. You can capture then your contact person, phone numbers and email addresses. And when saving, all of this information will be saved directly into VRM as an unregistered vendor, exactly as if a user had captured it into the system. And the banking details can also be captured here with the same approval processes that would have taken place if captured directly in VRM as well. Once saved, this is now telling me that I can only have switched around the account name and the number. Upon saving, we can see that the vendor has now been registered, and the vendor will get a temporary ID number and password that they can use to log in into VRM. Back within VRM, chosen user will be actually notified that that new vendor has registered. They can click on that and actually verify the information that was displayed. The vendor will also receive an email in their inbox to advise them that their request has been received and to ensure that they then upload the relevant documentation. This template will be tailored to your own business look and feel and your own business requirements. What the vendor can then do is log in on the website, and they will only have access to their information. They're not logging directly in to the VRM system, just into their own portion of it. They can then click on the Upload Documents tab. They can choose the document name that they're uploading, and they can then browse for the file and choose to upload it. This will then upload that document onto their account in VRM. And if I go back to VRM and I click on the Documents tab, we're going to see that tax clearance certificate as uploaded from the vendor. That vendor can also go into their account, view open purchase orders, view open requests for quotes, and actually report supplier problems directly into VRM through this. VRM also offers a series of standard reports and dashboards. This example dashboard is a vendor details dashboard with certain gadgets and reports here. This, for example, is a list of the top 10 vendors by turnover year to date. This is an example of a dashboard for vendor details to give us a high-level snapshot of what's happening within the creditors department. This example report here gives the top 10 vendors by turnover year to date. This is an example of a pie chart of your percentage spend in terms of purchase orders split up by the BEE contribution level. Further down we can see the cash flow required, which will actually calculate based on the purchase orders in ACPAC. The estimated delivery date plus the terms will give you the expected payment date or due date for the various purchase orders in the system. We can see here that in January there's a spike in terms of payments expected. This is a list of purchase orders that are outstanding within ACPAC, and along with the days sorted by the days that they're overdue. And on this side we can, if I expand this screen out, we can view the ACPAC statistics for the various vendors, and I can again sort by purchase order spend, for example, or I can choose a specific organization, actually interact with the data this way and see the amounts of payments, the average days to pay, and number of invoices and purchase order spend.